right now, even in Western Ukraine, where it's supposed to be safer, and I would keep saying that, Ternopil is quite safe, not anymore, but still, every church or every school, the way they take kids into their classes is the number that they could fit in a bomb shelter.
Oh, wow.
So if, for instance, my school where my kid's going, their capacity for bomb shelter is about 200 or 250 children. And the school, overall number is about 900. So they would determine which classes are going to go daily and which classes are going to go day in, day out, and which classes are going to go month in, month out.
Hey, welcome to Whitefields Community Church Mission Extra this week. Most of the time we have a sermon extra, but this week we have a special guest with us, Pastor Zhenya Chekushkin, all the way from Ternopil, Ukraine. Did I say your name right?
Yes.
All right. Well, we're going to have a story coming up, and one way you can remember his last name. But we want to talk about that today. We sometimes do these periodically when we have our missionaries that we support come in through town, and we get to sit down with them and kind of find out what's going on and have a face-to-face about the ministry that they are involved in. So we're super excited about having Zhenya here with us, and he's going to share with us what's going on in Ukraine and maybe kind of break through a lot of the noise that you might be hearing, that I'm hearing here on this side of the Great Puddle. And we're going to hear what's happening in ministry, family, and ways that you can partner with, and ways that you can be praying for Ukraine, praying for the ministry that's happening there. Now, Pastor Zhenya, he is the head of all of our Calvary chapels there in Ukraine. And we are part of here at Whitefields. We are part of the Calvary Chapel family here in the United States and globally, and he is the head of that. And so we have a strong partnership, and Pastor Nick and I have traveled there many times to connect with them and do ministry together, and it's always an honor and a privilege to do that. But we were you were at staff meeting with us today, and we were talking about your last name and how to best remember your last name. So share with us, and you guys share the story about getting back into the city with your passport.
Yeah. So first days of war, and we're entering. We took our kids to village where Luda's dad lives, and it's further away from the city. No noise, no air raid sirens and whatnot, and we will be visiting them every 3-4 days in the beginning, and so my last name Chekushkin. There's the way people are, like a slang that people use to describe 250 milliliters of vodka. It's chekushka. It's just the slang how people say it. And every time you would go and I would say my last name with non-church people, they would probably be laughing at me. So we're driving to the checkpoint near Ternopil, near our city, me and my wife, and we're at the line and we're waiting to get to the city, and there's soldiers and policemen, and they're checking your documents and passports, and this police. It was a soldier. He came up to me. I rolled down the window. He's like, passport. I'm giving him my passport. He's opening my passport. He's looking. It's like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm a pastor at Evangelical Church in Ternopil. We're serving refugees. And he's looking at my passport, my last name. And he's like, pastor? And start laughing hard. And then he raised my passport and he's like waving it to his peers and people serving with him. Is like, we have a pastor who's Chekushkin. It's just funny. I made his day. Worth it.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially during those days. So any kind of laughter, give them some kind of would have been great. So you just got off, before we started this conversation, just got off the phone with your family. So remind us of the names of your wife, and you have 2 kids, 1 daughter and 1 son.
Yes. So my wife, her name is Luda. We've been married for 19 years, celebrating 20 years this year.
Wow.
So she's a true blessing and support with everything we do. We do a lot of stuff together. Also, my son, he's 16. His name is Mark, and that's easy. And then good luck with pronouncing my daughter's name.
Yeah, I always forget.
Yeah, her name is Yarina. There's a more famous name, Irina, but it's not that. It's Yarina, it means light. So, yeah, she's 12.
Yeah, she always reminded me of Dora the Explorer.
Oh, yeah.
So and that's probably why I kept forgetting her name, because whenever I saw her, especially when she was much younger, she looked exactly like the girl in Dora.
Yeah, and she used to have that haircut.
Yeah, same haircut. Yeah.
Now she cut her hair shorter, so you would not confuse her.
Yeah, and a wonderful family. And so, how are they doing?
They're doing overall. I mean, all things considered, they're doing okay. We have some struggles with Yarina specifically. She has some anxiety attacks and panic attacks related to war, related to some other issues that she's having, but it's just stacking together. But other than that, I think we're doing good.
Yeah, and I think I've talked to you before when we've had conversations just about the kind of the sadness that this is kind of a new normal, like sirens, the fear of a missile. And we just 2 weeks ago, it's like you wrote and say, pray for us. A missile just hit a gas line. Like you showed us a picture. Somebody sent us a picture. I think it's either you. I think you sent us the picture.
I did, yeah.
Of the fireball from your apartment window. And, most of our people that are watching this video, we don't have a box to put that in. We don't have an understanding. And so, that the kids, the way the kids are, everyday sirens going down to bomb shelters, this is kind of their life, and it's kind of a new normal. How do you think that the church and families are kind of dealing with that, and how has the church been able to kind of come into those moments and minister to your families?
So I'll tell you two things just to kind of give the background. Yeah. Right. First is a picture that I wish I saved it. It was about a year and a half ago. In one of our news channels, there was a picture, actually a short video, but then a picture of a cafeteria in Kharkiv. And Kharkiv is right there at the border with Russia. And cafeteria has two walls that are completely glass, right? And then you see shattered glass on the floor and pieces of larger pieces of glass just laying on the frame. And then you see a little bit further away from the cafeteria, there's like a hole from the missile or the drone, whatever it was, but right there, very close. But what is interesting is that the cafeteria is open. Of course, no windows, no doors. But people are sitting at the tables drinking coffee. And there's a line of people from the outside waiting for barista to make them coffee. And two baristas, they just doing their job. They're making coffee. And I remember I showed that to one of the missionaries that was in Ukraine at that time. I showed that picture. I thought it was interesting. And the guy said, it's so heroic. It's so, they're so brave and bold. And like, no, probably they just PTSD. And that's normal. That's considered to be. So air raid siren comes on, and people just simply don't respond. They, for the most parts, they're like, okay, well, we know. Some cities that are closer to the front line, if the air raid siren goes off, it means that it's too late. Like missiles are already there.
Like Zaporizhia
and Dnipro even. Like those, and we have churches there. And that's the reality of how people respond to those things. So kids, that's the second part. Right now, even in Western Ukraine, where it's supposed to be safer, and I would keep saying that, Ternopil is quite safe, not anymore, but still, every church or every school, the way they take kids into their classes is the number that they could fit in a bomb shelter.
Oh, wow.
So if, for instance, my school where my kid's going, their capacity for bomb shelter is about 200 or 250 children. And the school like overall number is about 900. So they would determine which classes are going to go daily and which classes are going to go day in, day out, and which classes are going to go month in, month out. So, and every school makes their own decision. There's some schools in the neighborhood where they have a complete bomb shelter and they can do every day. But what scares you is that air raid siren goes off and you stop everything you do and everyone has to go into the basement.
Yeah.
And then it's been interrupted. There's no, like, you can imagine the level of education right now in Ukraine. But also with that, oftentimes Russian aircraft, they just play with us. So they try to make that, so they would fly out one of the airports with the missiles on the board, and they would circle around for half an hour and they will land. And they would do it 10, 15 times a day. That means that is what's happening with the school. There's no school. People are just sitting in the basement.
Right.
If they're sitting in the basement, if it's more developed school, probably they'll continue doing lessons there. If it's less developed, they're just sitting waiting. Or somebody of parents will come and pick them up, or they will be waiting until the end of the air raid siren. So our job as a church is to be in a safe place where people can come and understand that in spite of all of that, they can actually find some peace. That's why a lot of churches, they came up with more work with children. Like, for instance, one of our churches in Nizhyn, that's all they do. Their church is packed, 50, 60 children 3 times a week coming to their some kind of an event. Because they feel if they come to a church, they're being entertained, they have a Bible lesson, they have some hope that God could answer, but also just a place of, that somebody care. Because the reality is, most kids are just locked in their apartments or safe places, and they're just on their phones. And
especially those that live. And Nizhyn is east of Kiev,
yes,
right?
Yeah. It's right at the border with Belarus and Russia. So it's right there. It was Chernihiv specifically was under heavy attacks and to some degree occupied. Kryluki was surrounded. That's where our churches are located. And Nizhyn was surrounded, like all sides except for one road, with tanks and militaries. And
this is towards the beginning of the war.
Yes. Not anymore. It's free, but drones are flying over their roof daily, every night. They typically do it at night. You don't see the kamikaze drones. You don't see them at night, so you would use the huge flashlights to point out, search them out, and whatnot.
Now, I want to circle back to Nizhyn because I think that's a great story that's kind of developed over the last couple of years. But I want to kind of talk about how the church has kind of evolved since the beginning days of the war, when especially the church there in Ternopil became a hub for humanitarian aid, to where kind of how has the vision and how has kind of the practical aspects of your day-to-day, week-to-week ministry kind of evolved over these last couple years.
So
3 years now since the war began.
3 years, exactly. 3 years.
It's amazing.
It's in the beginning, Russia would say, we give you 3 days and we're going to be over with. Like 3 weeks. Okay, we'll do 3 weeks, 3 months, now 3 years. And still there, still holding and fighting and do whatever we can to survive. And so when war started, a lot of those regions that were closer to the Russian border, specifically where the attacks were coming, they would evacuate to safer places, and Western Ukraine would be one of those places. Ternopil would be a hub for a lot of trains that would come from that area, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Kyiv. They would be coming from that area. They would stop in Ternopil. People would get out, and then they would be transferred. Either they're going to go to further away in the west of Ukraine, or there would be buses that would take people to Hungary, to Romania, to Poland, to Slovakia, like all of those countries that would be open to receive refugees. We, as a church in Ternopil, we opened up our doors to receive refugees, and people would be sleeping on the mattresses on the floor. We would be serving them food that we did not prepare. Other people from either our congregation or other communities, they would reach out, say, hey, we cooked this meal, you can come and pick it up. So it was very uniting, and people were united to serve the purpose of helping people as much as.
Because there was a restaurant, if I recall correctly, there was a restaurant in the city that decided to provide evening meals. For how long did they do that?
They did for our church. They didn't start it right away. First, they were doing it only for soldiers that are on checkpoints, because checkpoints were around the city, and then they opened up and they did it for us for 9 months.
Wow,
there was
that's amazing. Yeah,
cooking for us. We would bring food products. They would never charge us anything. They would be cooking, and we would just bring pots. That's all we did. So as we were there, Vadim and Tanya, pastor and his wife and their children, they moved to Ternopil, and they stayed at one of our locations. It was a YWAM base in Ternopil. They lived there. And they knew that there was a church in Ternopil, so they found us, they came, we talked, and he said, I would love to hang out with you guys. I said, great. I was excited because there's another pastor in the room. But there was so much work to do, and I had a hard time preparing for anything, like studying, teaching. That was just not in my head. Administrative side, that's our team is who stayed there, mostly administrative. So it was our strong suit. We started doing whatever needs to be done. But teaching was a bit difficult. And I thought, okay, we have a pastor. I reached out to him. I said, Vadim, would you like to? He's like, no, I won't. Like, okay, take your time. About a week later or 2 weeks later, I approached him again. I said, Vadim, let's do it. He's like, nope. Like, okay. Talk to my wife. She's like, you need to do a third time. In Ukraine we always do 3 invitations for everything, food, and those kinds of things. So I approached him the third time, and he said no. But we were in the car, and we were driving, so I started asking him why, and he told me his story, and it's a long story of how all the burnouts and difficulties that they had to go through since he became a pastor. For 15 years he was a pastor, that he was all so hard. And for 3 hours we talked, and he just poured out his heart, and I was in shock, and I was praying for him, and we had a really nice time together, and I realized I didn't want to push him in anything. I told him, take your time as much as you need. And he did. For 9 months, they stayed in Ternopil.
And he was a refugee in Ternopil, right?
Yeah. And one of the missionaries that your church is supporting, John Markey, he is a co-pastor. We're co-pastoring Ternopil Church, and he took his family to the States, so he opened up his apartment for Vadim and Tanya to live there. For free, and they were able. We found a church from a fund. We found an opportunity to help them out financially, so that they could just be there. And as their time was coming close to leave Ternopil, we had a conversation, me and Vadim, and I told him, I said, Vadim, when you go back to Nizhyn, don't do church. I know I'm a pastor, and I don't supposed to say those things to another pastor, but. It wasn't because of sin. It wasn't because of things that he did. It was because he was burned out. And I thought it would be a healthy thing for him to slow down, not to be right away in the ministry. And we talked, and he's like, I hear you, and I will do it. I will not go back to do the church. Well, you know how pastors are. 2 days later, he was doing humanitarian work in the city, and he was doing the pastor thing all over again. But God, through humanitarian aid, through all of those doors, he opened an opportunity for them to reach out to their community, and specifically children.
And a lot of those children, so yeah, we come back to Nijin here. A lot of those children are orphans, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have two statuses for that.
Yeah.
We have orphans and we have half orphans. So when
Okay.
there's one of parents
Yeah.
is away or killed or whatever, so those two statuses considered to be like the risk group. There's also other groups that would be part of that risk, children at risk group. But yeah, and all of those kids, that's the only place where they could go to have something. They're always there. The church is located near the apartment area, where there's a lot of apartment buildings, and there's playgrounds but there's nothing to do in those playgrounds. And when they come to church, they found that there's ministers, there's people who want to serve. They always find snacks. They always find something to do. They're always doing something interesting. They're telling interesting stories. So children started to, became a habit. After school, I'm going to the church facility to just hang out. And they have a good property, beautiful property. It was interesting that with that, it started the whole new wave of church for Nijin.
Right, yeah.
And they did a lot of kids ministry, but through that, Vadim just sent me a video from last Sunday, and the church is full of parents or foster parents or any kind of caregiver of those kids, and they're already started coming to church services because they see that it's unconditional. They're not trying to force kids into anything. And parents are like, well, we're grateful. We want to be a part of it.
Well, let's just talk about that just a second, because, when we think of the church, we all kind of maybe have our own definition of what the church looks like, what the Western church, American church, what the church in Colorado looks like. Like, how do you think the church has evolved or changed or, during this time of war there in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, in the beginning of war, all the churches in Ukraine, including later on, in the later days, including traditional Orthodox Catholics, Greek Catholics, all of them, they had to change because they realized that in order for us to be an answer to the need of the society at the moment, we need to open our doors for refugees, we need to do humanitarian aid, we need to provide shelter, provide hope. And a lot of them, they open up the doors to, becoming a church 24/7 when you don't have... All you do is receiving refugees, and you would our church building was not closed. The doors of the church were not closed for, I think, 8 months.
Wow!
It was always open, 24/7, because there were always people who served and who helped and who was answering. Unfortunately, we heard some of the stories, even in our city, where in order for you to come to live at the church for a day or 2 or 3 nights, you have to listen to a class of gospel preaching, and then you'll be let in. We did not do that. Maybe we should. I don't know. But our church didn't grow much because of that. But we were answering the needs, and then oftentimes when there was an opportunity to sit around the table. And just have coffee, they would ask questions. Why do you guys do it? Why? And it would open an opportunity to build connections, build relationships, and through that share the gospel. But when things started slowly de-escalating on our territory, I'm talking about Dnipro River that divides Ukraine into halves, central west and then central east. If we're looking at that, then all of the churches that are on the west side of the west bank of Dnipro, they started moving back to, a typical church life.
Right.
What I mean by that is we're coming on Sunday for church services, we're coming on for the Bible studies at home or the midweek Bible study. We're just doing our regular routine church. that's okay, but it became very obvious for so many that it's artificial. It's not real.
Right.
It doesn't.
Something's changed.
Yes.
Right.
Others, they realize that no, we need to adjust, and we need to understand that there are needs that people have, and we could be hands and feet of Jesus, showing that love, expressing those things, and just be there available for people on a regular basis. Those churches started growing. Other churches, people are not stupid in general mass.
Yeah.
So they see if it's fake. We don't want to go there. We would go to this place where it's real, where people are still understanding that war is in the country and things are happening in the country. A lot of churches, they move their focus to working with people in the East, in the front lines. So many churches were open during this 3 years closer to the front line. Yeah. Thousands of people are coming to churches because it's the only place where they can receive any kind of help. But also people are hungry and thirsty for hope.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to say they're hungry and thirsty for Christ. Probably in the process they are, but in the beginning it's hope. Because there are people who are serving and saying we're not, God is there and He's going to take care of our needs. And then chaplain ministry grew. Finally, in our country, we have, you guys in the States, you have chaplain institution, chaplaincy, for many years. And we finally have it officially recognized with police, with medical, with army. Not fire department yet, but they're working on that as well. So the chaplaincy for going to the East, working with soldiers, working with refugees, not refugees, the people who stayed there, because a lot of people are still there. All of that, mind changed towards that. And we understand that the challenge is still there. And one of the challenges that we're going to face is going to be when a war will end. Those soldiers and people will come back. Yeah. We already see some results of it because all of our hospitals are filled with amputees.
Right, yeah.
Are filled with wounded soldiers. And oftentimes you go in the street and you see like one leg is missing, or the arm is missing, and the awkwardness, we don't know how to respond. We don't know what to do with that. When those people are going to come back, all of them, one way or another, they will have PTSD and they will be reacting in a certain way. And that's the challenge for the church right now, is to be prepared, psychologically be prepared to serve those people, to be counseling them, going through the process with them, working with their families, because that's going to be another issue. Working with children, again, because that's going to be another issue. Because, you've been doing actively serving, fighting, seeing your brothers at arms dying, and now you're coming back and there's a kind of a normal life, and your child is wanting to buy a new iPhone. And that's too far. And people are, we already have those cases.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, that's a momentous task. And I love the way that you're working on building partnerships with other organizations and other groups. And one that we want to talk about is just the going back to Nijin, which kind of ended up being the central part. But I think of this conversation, but kind of represents a lot of what is happening in the country is that we've been talking about, we've been supporting Nijin with the Ukrainian fund here that has been coming through Whitefields. But it was like at some point we're like, well, maybe God's going to do something else. And what God did do is that there was a Calvary Chapel in Lynchburg, Virginia, that has now adopted that particular church and is now pouring into it. So talk a little bit about how that all happened.
So 2.5 years ago, we had Uzhgorod conference.
Yes.
Yeah. So prior to that, you, George, Marky, John, Nate, approached me and individually said you should, coordinate the work in Ukraine. And I think I told you no once at least. But finally, after praying and talking to our team in Ternopil, realizing that I guess everyone sees that God is, calling our family and me specifically for the role. I realized that my role as a coordinator for Calvary Chapel Ukraine is not the bishop position where I tell what to do. It's mostly calling, talking, serving pastors, serving leaders where they are. And as God is opening this door, I started talking to people. Also, at the same time, a lot of churches from here, Europe, started reaching out saying, how can we help? No, we can't do humanitarian aid anymore because there's no more resources. We can't do funds, but we can come. We can, build connections, build partnerships. And that's how several churches from the States, one of them is Calvary Chapel Flathead Valley
down San Diego?
No, that's Montana.
Montana, sorry.
Montana, yeah. And then Calvary Chapel Lynchburg, they reached out through those connections. And they reached out to me. They said, we want to come and we want to check it for ourselves. Yeah. And I don't, okay, I'll take you to this place because it's very, touching and there's going to be some manipulation happening there. I say, you guys come, where you want to go, I'll take you to several locations. I'll be silent the entire time. I'll be your driver. Yeah. You check it for yourself. And when Jeremy Grafman, who is a missions pastor in Calvary Chapel Lynchburg, he came in a time where Tanya Kotolinets, Vadim's wife, in Nizhyn, her mom passed away a day or 2 days before we were supposed to drive there. And we're coming there, and it was just a challenging process because it was really devastating for Tanya. And my wife and Tanya, our administrator, they spent a lot of time with her. Simply, she was in the bed. She would not leave the room. And they spent time there talking to her, praying with her, encouraging her, just simply being there for her. And Jeremy saw that, and then he saw all the activities of the church, and he went back, and he was the storyteller of what God is doing in that area. And then they sent one team. They send a team. They have a lot of contractors, builders in their church. So they got together, I think 6 or 7 of them. And they came and there was a need. Church had a newer building that they weren't using because it wasn't finished. And specifically the roof wasn't finished. It was leaking all over the place, and so they came and they fixed it. They brought resources, they brought their own instruments, and they brought their own gear, and they set it up. In 4 days, they redid the entire roof of the building. Wow. Again, seeing in person all of those kids that were coming, they went back. And then the Calvary Chapel Lynchburg sent another team, not to Nizhyn this time. We had a marriage conference, and girls came help with kids during the marriage conference. They started building that bridge and that connection. And basically it led into beginning of this year, they reached out and they said, we feel like God is leading us to become a partner or sister church, take Nizhyn as a sister church to our church. And Calvary Chapel Lynchburg is 3,000 people church. Wow. And they've been chatting, they've been writing emails, supporting, praying. Vadim and Tanya were reaching out to Calvary Chapel Lynchburg, sharing the testimonies, encouraging believers in Lynchburg. So it's that side. And then on the other hand, Calvary Chapel Lynchburg said, well, we want to step in and we want to be a support for you guys, for your guys' ministry. And they are. Yeah. So God is opening that door, and we're looking for those connections and we're looking for those partnerships simply to be an encouragement for one another. That's number one. And praying for one another, that's number two. Yeah. And just build those bridges.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, that's such an awesome story. And so we could probably talk forever about this.
Yes.
And but we have to cut this short at some point. But so where are you traveling to after you leave us?
My final place, I'll go to Renewed Life Church in San Diego, and that's going to be my kind of last stop. I do want to meet the pastor from Calvary Chapel San Diego, Phil Metzger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we all know Phil very well.
Yeah, and I do want to meet up with him. They in the beginning of war, they were one of the major supporters for Ukraine relief efforts, and we just want to reconnect. And that's going to be my end. Next Monday, I'm flying out back to Krakow, Poland, and then taking train to Ternopil.
Oh, wow. Well, we're super excited about what you're doing in Ukraine, and we're super appreciative of it. And we love hearing the stories. And I mean, it's just amazing anytime I go there, just to have conversations with people. And just my faith is always encouraged and grounded so much, just talking to Ukrainians and Ukrainian Christians and seeing that their faith has not wavered, even in the midst of all that they've gone through. And as I said, earlier, we in the West, we really don't have a box to put what's going on there. And and as I've traveled over there, the Lord's really laid on my heart just the ministry of lament, that we lament together. I don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. God knows what's going on. We're going to cry out to God together, and we're going to pray. And the Lord's done amazing things these past 3 years. We've just seen the evolution of what's happened with the churches, and we just want to continue supporting what you're doing, because I think this is the beginning of something that God's going to use this tragedy to be a conduit for His gospel message. And so thank you for joining us on this podcast today. He's going to be with us again, and if you are listening, today is what, April? What is today?
No, it's March.
March 25th. March 25th, in 2 days, on Thursday, at our 2 p.m. Q&A, live Q&A, you are going to be able to ask him and interact with Zhenya live on YouTube. So if it is March 27th and you 2 p.m., you want to turn him on, and Pastor Nick will be on our usual 2 p.m. Q&A on YouTube, and Pastor Zhenya will be with us, and you'll be able to ask him questions in the chat, and that'll be your time to interact. You'll be able to get into some more information out of that. So what is it that you can do? Well, the first thing you can do is you can pray, and you can cry out to the Lord together with your family, with your church, for an end to this war. Nobody wants this war going on. We want to see the end of this war. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is you can be praying for Zhenya and his team and the church there in Ternopil, that the God will continue to provide for them, continue to strengthen them. It's heard about his daughter. His daughter represents, thousands and thousands and maybe millions of kids in the country that are dealing with the anxiety and the stress of being at war every single day. You can be praying for him and his family and those connected to the church, their ministry. And then if the Lord leads you, you can give to that ministry. That money comes to us and it goes straight to what they're doing. And it gets used in the most amazing ways. God multiplies that out. And you can give that here, info@whitefieldschurch.com or Whitefields Church online, whitefieldschurch.com. You can go right there and you can hit give. There's a Ukraine Relief Fund. You can give there, or you can give directly to Zhenya if God so puts that on your heart. So those three things: pray for the end of the war, pray for the Calvary Chapel churches, and the church, and God has used the church, every church there in Ukraine as a foundational vehicle for his work in the humanitarian aid, communications, hope, and all those things, and the ministry of the gospel. But specifically pray for Zhenya and his family and the church, the Ternopil Church. God's doing amazing things. And then give. If you can do that, give. Whitefieldschurch.com, and that money will be We don't get any of that. It goes straight to the ministry that's happening there, and God uses it for rebuilding, for humanitarian aid, for supporting pastors and ministry work, orphans and kids, and all the things we talked about today. That's what it gets used for. So thank you. If you're here at the end of this podcast, we thank you for joining us. Thank you, Zhenya, for joining us on this.
Thank you for inviting.
Yep, Thursday. And if you miss Thursday, it'll be on YouTube anyway. So, all right. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
God bless.